Let me paint you a picture of corporate insanity. It's 2014, and while Ford and Chevrolet are busy measuring lap times and arguing about weight reduction, Dodge walks into the room with a sledgehammer and 707 horsepower. Not 600, not 650, 707. A number so absurd that when journalists first heard it, they thought it was a typo. But here's the beautiful part. The engineers who built this monster pushed far beyond what anyone expected, delivering more power than executives ever imagined possible. This is the Hellcat, the car that proved you don't need sophisticated engineering when you have absolutely unhinged ambition. To understand why the Hellcat exists, you need to understand what Dodge was facing in 2014. The Challenger was the oldest platform in the muscle car wars, riding on architecture that traced its roots back to a Mercedes-Benz E-Class from the early 2000s. Ford had the Boss 302 and GT500. Chevrolet had the Camaro ZL1 and the track-destroying Z28. And Dodge had a heavy two-door couch that couldn't keep up on a racetrack. The automotive press had written them off. The enthusiast forums called them irrelevant. So what did Dodge do? They chose violence. Deep inside FCA's powertrain division, a man named Chris Cowland had a plan. As director of SRT powertrain development, his official target was 600 horsepower, enough to match what Ford was rumored to be doing with the next GT500. But Cowland had other ideas. He went to the executives and asked for 675 horsepower. Same timeline, same fuel economy targets. They approved it. What they didn't fully anticipate was that his team's internal ambition had always been 700. The team pushed far beyond what executives initially expected. The real numbers were kept close to the chest until final certification. For months, the Hellcat team operated with ambitious internal targets that exceeded official goals, building the most powerful American production car in history while delivering more than anyone had asked for. When the final SAE certified numbers came back at 707 horsepower, even the head of Dodge was impressed. 707 horsepower. Let that satisfying number sink in for a moment. At 6,000 RPM, this supercharged 6.2-liter Hemi V8 produces more power than a Lamborghini Aventador, which cost $400,000. The Hellcat? $58,000, before the dealer markup. When asked why they chose 707 specifically, the engineers said it simply, quote, had a nice ring to it. And when asked why they built a 700 horsepower engine at all, Chris Cowland's answer was perfect. Quote, we built it because we could. The heart of this insanity is a 2.4-liter IHI twin-screw supercharger. Yes, the supercharger alone displaces more than an entire Mazda Miata engine. This monster moves up to 30,000 liters of air per minute under full load, force-feeding the Hemi at 11.6 psi through a massive 92mm throttle body. 2 air-to-water intercoolers are built directly into the supercharger housing, keeping intake temperatures manageable while you're busy terrifying your neighbors. And the sound this thing makes, that mechanical whine, that industrial scream that announces your arrival 3 blocks before you get there, that's not an accident. That's the Hellcat's war cry. 650 pound-feet of torque at 4,000 RPM. That's diesel truck territory. Except this torque comes with the fury of 8 cylinders and a supercharger screaming at redline. The engine uses a reinforced cast-iron block derived from Chrysler's Gen 3 Hemi architecture. Because even Dodge knew that 700 horsepower needs serious structural integrity. Forged steel crankshaft, forged aluminum pistons, powder-forged connecting rods. This isn't a modified street engine. This is a factory-built weapon. Buyers got 2 choices: a Tremec TR6060 6-speed manual for the purists, or the ZF8 HP90 8-speed automatic for those who wanted to actually use all 707 horsepower without destroying the tires every single shift. In 2015, 52% chose the automatic. The remaining 48% chose the manual, and eternal bragging rights. Now here's where Dodge proved they understood theater better than any other manufacturer. The Hellcat comes with 2 keys, one red, one black. The black key limits the engine to, quote, only 500 horsepower, still more than a Mustang GT. But insert that red key, and the full 707 horsepower awakens. It's completely unnecessary from an engineering standpoint. But psychologically, handing someone a red key and telling them it unlocks the beast? That's automotive marketing genius. The black key isn't just a valet mode gimmick. It's a completely different engine calibration. The ECU limits boost pressure, retards timing, and caps the output at 500 horsepower with significantly reduced torque. Still enough to embarrass most sports cars on the road, but a massive safety margin for when you don't trust whoever's driving. Let's address the elephant in the room, and I mean that literally. The Hellcat weighs approximately 4,450 pounds. For context, that's heavier than some pickup trucks. The Camaro Z28, with 200 fewer horsepower, weighed nearly 400 pounds less. The Hellcat doesn't dance through corners. It intimidates them into submission through sheer mass and power. But here's what most people get wrong. The Hellcat does not have a live rear axle. The LX platform uses a sophisticated 5-link independent rear suspension with an isolated cradle. Up front, there's an SLA short long arm setup with high-mounted upper A-arms. Both ends get Bilstein adaptive damping shocks. This isn't primitive. It's just optimized for comfort cruising at 200 miles per hour. Not carving apexes. Here's a detail that separates the Hellcat from every other 2015 Challenger: hydraulic power steering. While every other Challenger that year switched to electric assist, the Hellcat kept the hydraulic system. Why? Because at 199 miles per hour, you want actual mechanical connection to the road, not software interpreting your inputs. Let that sink in. Dodge built a car that needed hydraulic steering because electric assist couldn't handle the speeds they expected owners to achieve. 707 horsepower meets, wait for it, Pirelli P0 275 40Z R20 tires, the same width on all four corners. For perspective, the Dodge Viper, with less power, used 335mm rear tires. The result? The Hellcat doesn't just break traction, it vaporizes rubber at will. This was either a massive engineering oversight or deliberate chaos. Knowing Dodge? Probably both. Motor Trend tested the Hellcat at 3.7 seconds to 60 miles per hour. But here's the catch. They got that time by launching in second gear, not using launch control. The car had so much torque that first gear was essentially useless for acceleration runs. The official NHRA certified quarter mile? 11.2 seconds at 125 miles per hour on street tires. With drag radials, 10.8 at 125 miles per hour trap speed. That's faster than a Porsche 911 Turbo S through the quarter mile, a car that costs 3 times as much. The Hellcat could outrun Italian exotics in a straight line while costing less than a reasonably equipped BMW 5 Series. This wasn't just value. This was a complete destruction of the price-to-performance hierarchy. 199 miles per hour, drag limited. The Challenger has the aerodynamics of a flying brick, so even 707 horsepower couldn't push it past 199. Dodge didn't electronically limit it. Physics did. The Charger Hellcat actually hits 204, because sedans are surprisingly slipperier than retro muscle coupes. Who knew that having a trunk made you faster? Now for my favorite engineering detail, the air catcher headlamp. Look at the driver's side headlight. There's a functional opening that sucks cold air directly into the engine bay. Dodge claims blocking this inlet costs approximately 7 horsepower, which means they engineered the headlight to contribute to performance. Most manufacturers struggle to make headlights look good. Dodge made them functional. Here's what made the Hellcat's timing absolutely perfect. When it launched in 2015, Ford had nothing to compete with it. The Shelby GT500 was discontinued after 2014. The GT350 wouldn't arrive until 2016. For one glorious year, Dodge had the muscle car thrown completely to themselves. Ford brought a knife to a gunfight, and then realized they'd left the knife at home. The 2015 Camaro ZL1 made 580 horsepower, 127 less than the Hellcat. The track-focused Z28 had just 505. Even the Corvette Z06, with its racing pedigree, came close with 650 horsepower. But the Corvette cost over $80,000. The Hellcat democratized supercar power, making 700 horses available to anyone with decent credit. I'll let you process that. A Dodge muscle car with more power than a Corvette Z06 for $20,000 less, unlike the stripped-out Z28, which deleted the air conditioning and infotainment to save weight. The Hellcat kept everything. Heated and cooled Napa leather seats. Harman Kardon premium audio. The Uconnect 8.4-inch touchscreen with SRT performance pages. You could drive this car across the country in absolute comfort, then destroy a drag strip at your destination. The Uconnect system includes customizable SRT drive modes, allowing you to independently adjust engine response, transmission behavior, steering weight, suspension firmness, and traction control. Want a comfortable cruise with aggressive throttle? Done. Track mode everything for maximum chaos? Also done. The Hellcat could be a grand tourer or a quarter-mile monster. Your choice. With great power comes Brembo brakes. 15.4-inch two-piece slotted rotors up front with 6-piston calipers. 13.8-inch ventilated rotors in the rear with 4-piston calipers. Dodge claimed these were the largest brakes ever fitted to a Chrysler Group vehicle. Motor Trend recorded 60-0 stopping in 109 feet, respectable. But reviewers noted the brakes could fade after repeated hard use. The Hellcat was built for straight-line violence, not endurance racing. In 2015, Dodge built exactly 7,168 Challenger Hellcats. The Charger added another 1,334. Even with production ramped up, dealers had waiting lists over a year long. Some customers paid over $80,000, $20,000 over MSRP, just to skip the line. Dodge had accidentally created the most desirable muscle car in decades. But with great power came a great problem. The Hellcat quickly became the most frequently targeted vehicle in America. Insurance data shows Hellcats were involved in theft claims at 60 times the national average. That's not a typo. 60 times. In 2023 alone, over 1,000 Hellcats were reported taken in just the first quarter. Dodge had built such an appealing car that everyone wanted one, including people who didn't want to pay for it. Speaking of Hellcat problems, the very first retail Hellcat sold in Colorado was destroyed within 1 hour of delivery. The owner picked up his brand new supercharged monster and crashed it before he could even complete the break-in period. 70 grand of automotive fury, gone in 60 minutes. Dodge didn't advertise this, but the internet absolutely did. The Hellcat didn't just win the horsepower wars, it dominated social media. 6 months after launch, the hashtag Hellcat was generating 50 tweets per day. The competing hashtag for the new Camaro? 1/10 of that traffic. The Hellcat transcended automotive enthusiasm. It became a cultural phenomenon that reached people who'd never cared about muscle cars. The original Hellcat spawned an entire family of insanity. The 717 horsepower Hellcat Red Eye. The 808 horsepower Demon. The 807 horsepower Superstock. And finally, the 1,025 horsepower Demon 170 in 2023. What started as corporate rebellion became an entire philosophy. More power, always more power. The Hellcat succeeded because Dodge understood something Ford and Chevrolet had forgotten. Muscle cars were never about lap times. They were about straight-line violence, about showing up to a stoplight and making the car next to you feel inadequate. The Camaro Z28 might have been faster around a track, but the Hellcat was faster into your imagination. 707 horsepower, $58,000. A car built by engineers who pushed far beyond what anyone expected, just to deliver more power than anyone asked for. A muscle car so desirable it gets stolen 60 times more often than average. A supercharger that displaces more than some entire engines. This wasn't just a car. This was Dodge's middle finger to everyone who said American manufacturers couldn't compete with European exotics. In the end, the Hellcat proved something important about the American automotive spirit. Sometimes the answer to sophisticated engineering isn't better engineering, it's more power. Sometimes lap times don't matter as much as goosebumps. And sometimes, just sometimes, the best business strategy is building something so absolutely unhinged that the entire world has to pay attention. The engineers exceeded expectations. The executives were impressed, and the customers lined up around the block, waiting over a year, paying $20,000 over sticker, just to experience 707 horsepower of pure American insanity. So what do you think? Does raw power beat sophisticated engineering? Would you take the Hellcat over a track-focused Z28? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button, because next time we're exploring another chapter of muscle car madness. This is Car Chronicles, where the engineers always exceed expectations.